Okay, well, welcome everyone joining us today for this Netflix panel that's a result of this generous collaboration between Netflix, the creators and stars of Selena the series, and UTSA. I want to say welcome to my students. I know you should be out there somewhere. I can't see you this morning like I normally do, but good morning, and the same for everyone else joining us. I'll quickly introduce myself for those of you who don't know me. My name is Sonia Aleman. I'm an associate professor of Mexican American Studies at UTSA. I am a native of South Texas. I was born and raised in Cotulla, Texas. I am a graduate of St. Mary's University here in San Antonio. I got my master's at UT Austin and then my PhD at the University of Utah in Salt Lake City, where I began my career as a college professor and a scholar of Latinx media studies. So that's one of the reasons why I'm super excited for today's conversation. And on behalf of myself and my students and the rest of UTSA, I want to express my gratitude with sharing the space with both of you today. And if you don't mind, I'd like to do a brief introduction as well for each of you, and then we can get on with the questions that my students and I have generated for our conversation today. So Ricardo Chavira is a native of South Texas, calling San Antonio home for most of his life. He is a graduate of the formerly known Robert E. Lee High School and attended University of Incarnate Word. He's been an actor for over 20 years. Some of the roles that you might remember him from would be as Eva Longoria's husband in Desperate Housewives, and more recently as a presidential candidate Francisco Vargas in Scandal. He was also in one of my all-time favorite shows, Jane the Virgin, where he played a love interest for Xiomara, Jane's mother, in season 3. He has been recognized for his outstanding work by winning 2 Screen Actors Guild Award for outstanding performance by an ensemble in a comedy series, and as well as 3 Alma Award nominations. Jaime Davila was born in McAllen, Texas, and where he lived for the early part of his life, crossing back and forth to Mexico as part of his family life. He earned his bachelor's from Harvard and a master's in Latin American Studies from Oxford. He serves as executive producer of Selena the series and is president and co-founder of Campanario Entertainment, a production company that produces multilingual content for both the US and Latin America in order to generate Latina or X-centric programming and inclusive programming.
Thank you.
So welcome.
Wow, I didn't know you'd done all that, Jaime. That's amazing.
No, everyone else deserves the credit. Again.
So besides that introduction, I'm wondering if you might want to start us off by telling us a little bit about yourself growing up in this part of the world and how it early memories of shaping like your sense of your Mexican-American identity, growing up in the spaces that you did. What are some of the memories that you have that made that identity salient to you?
Wow, that's a good question. Go, Jaime, please.
No, so I was born in McAllen and spent the early, until I was about 10, grew up in McAllen, and McAllen was great. I mean, for me, growing up it was so natural to speak English and Spanish, to have stores, have both Spanish and English on the aisles, to be hanging out with your family all the time, right? All your tias, all your primos. I mean, there wasn't a night during the week that we weren't together. And then obviously on weekends, we were all together. Because McAllen is really where my dad's family is from. My mom is from Mexico City. And so McAllen was this amazing place. And South Texas was this amazing place, right? Where you had incredible food, incredible family life, and everyone supported you. And I think for me, honestly, my identity became really key when I moved out of McAllen. I moved to New York City when I was about 10. And then all of a sudden, no one around me spoke Spanish. I was the only Mexican American. If there were any Latinos, they were Puerto Rican or Dominican, and it was a totally different experience than mine. So I think for me, it was, I actually felt like when I left McAllen, I became even more a Mexican American, because I really sort of, in my entire life, I've really sort of gone back to those early memories of joy and of celebration. And that's really what I remember about my identity, right? And who I am. And I sort of carried that with me in all these other environments where I'm often, the only Mexican American in the room. I really remember my South Texas roots about being humble, about being kind, about working hard. Yeah, I don't think I'd be here where I am today without having been born in McAllen and having had those early years with all my family around me.
Thank you.
I was born in Austin, Texas. My parents were both in graduate school at the time. I'm the child of two professors. My father holds a PhD in medical sociology and went back later on and got his law degree. Became an attorney, then became a judge. My mother, before she passed away, had 3 master's degrees in public health, anthropology, and theology. So, education was just kind of a given in our household. But we moved around a little bit. I was born there, and then we moved down to the valley. My dad was teaching what was then Pan American University in McAllen. I went to Our Lady of Sorrows, a Catholic school in McAllen, from kindergarten to 2nd grade. And then after that, we moved up to San Antonio. So really, when I could really, the memories, 1st, 2nd grade and all that, when you start remembering things as a child, when you were a child, really happened in San Antonio. And San Antonio has always been home. I went to Blessed Sacrament Catholic School. Then I went to what used to be Robert E. Lee High School. Then I went to Incarnate Word College. And I basically stayed in San Antonio my whole life. I mean, I know every side of San Antonio you can imagine. I know. Yeah, I never feel more at home than when I'm in San Antonio. I feel like I'm absolutely myself, and I can be myself, and I don't have to worry about anything else. And I've felt that way for years. I'll continue to feel that way. I'll continue to make San Antonio my home in some capacity. My children are there. Wife is there. It's who I am.
It's a rarity. I think when we talk about actors in Hollywood, I mean, most of them live in LA, and Ricardo, to say his base in San Antonio, his home where he's raising his family. I just think that's really special and unique. And, I think Ricardo deserves a lot of praise for that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Little difficult. Yeah. Little difficult, but we, yeah, but we make it work. We make it work,
Sure.
And I wouldn't have it any other way. I mean, they're close to my father's there, my sisters are there, my wife's family's there. So we've got that nucleus around us, and that's very important.
Absolutely. One of the other things my students really wanted to know, now that you've, grounded yourselves kind of in this area, where does Selena enter into your lives at that point? Like, what part, do you listen to her music? Do you become fans? Like, where is she in that experience of growing up Mexican American here for you?
Oh, it's constant. I mean, so yeah, growing up in the 80s and 90s in South Texas, the quinceañeras were a major part. I mean, Selena's music was such a huge part of my life growing up. I mean, there wasn't a wedding that we wouldn't go to in the early 90s that we wouldn't hear a Selena song. I mean, it was just so present. And, I even remember when I moved to New York City afterwards, she was sadly murdered at that moment. And I remember her song, Dreaming of You, was released shortly thereafter.
Mm-hmm.
I remember really vividly because it was actually my first, co-ed dance. And I was a really chubby, nerdy kid from South Texas. And so I was just like hating it. I was like, I don't know what to do here. How do I talk to girls, whatever not? And then I really always remember this moment where they started playing Dreaming of You. And it was, I'm trying to remember if it was the first time I'd heard it. It might've been the first time I'd heard, no, it wasn't the first time I'd heard it. I'd heard it before, but it was just like in that moment, I heard Selena sing and I just felt at home and I felt connected. And that dance, I remember, ended up being a super fun event, right? So I will say that like Selena and her music has been a part of my life entirely. Like I brought her music to college. I brought her music to grad school. I was in the UK, dancing to Bitty Bitty Bom Bom. So, to me, her music, her culture has always been a big part of my life. And so, yeah, I working on the series was amazing because it was really sort of being able to tap into something that I so loved and was such an impact on me, and sort of working with a team of writers and actors and producers. How do you take that emotion that I had growing up? How do you take that love that I had growing up, that Ricardo had that all these people had? How do you translate that onto screen? So I think that was, that was a big part of it. How do I translate that emotion that I have for Selena and the Quintanilla family. How do I translate that onto screen with all the talented people that, you know, we get to put, so yeah, it's a major part of my life.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, growing up in San Antonio, you know, I remember she and I were separated by 4 months. She was 4 months older than me. We're both born in '71. You know, getting into my father's truck when he picked me up from school in the '80s, I was in high school, and you know, I wanted to listen to grunge metal or whatever, and he always had, you know, the Tejano stations on KTXN or KCOR, and he'd be like, hey, there's this little girl, and she's really good, and you should listen to her, you know, and I was like, what are you talking about? And he's like, no, she's like your age, Miguel, and she's out there performing, and it was Selena. And he loved her music. He loved all of her songs, and even though there was a generational gap for him, you know, it was like that was his music, Tejano music, conjunto music. And he was like, you know, I talked to him recently, and he said, you know, if it wasn't for Selena, we wouldn't have been exposed to Tejano and conjunto. He goes, Tejano and conjunto music before she really hit the scene was really only played in cantinas or out in the fields. You know, that's the only exposure that you got to that kind of music. And she really made, I mean, it was already becoming something, but she blasted it out onto the scene, you know. And then of course, you know, with her tragic death, it you know, that it just kind of de-escalated, you know, directly afterwards. You know, I hopefully this series will bring a resurgence to Tejano music and conjunto music, because I love it.
Yeah. So there was a specific student who wanted to know if you have any favorite Selena songs.
I mean, so many. I love Fotos y Recuerdos. Obviously, it's a cover song, but it's just, I think their arrangement of it's so great. Bidi Bidi Bom Bom is probably my favorite, though. I'm very basic in that sense. It's just such a great song. But I will say one of the songs that I've been hearing a lot that will premieres in the part one of the series that I also love is actually Dame un Beso, which was actually their first song. Mm-hmm. And I'm constantly singing that one in the back of my mind, you know, the past few months. So yeah, I would say a mixture of those three, mm-hmm. Depending on the moment.
Dame un Beso, Como la Flor, and La Carcacha.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Super fun songs. So given that you had such a love, what was it that drew you into this project? Can you walk us through what elements kind of came together to attach yourselves to Selena the series? Ricardo, how did it come your way? Jaime, how did you get involved in it?
Jaime, I'm going to let you start because yours is the bigger picture.
I started my company Campanario about 6 years ago with the ultimate goal of creating mainstream entertainment through a Latinx lens, right? So really working hard to sort of, and we're based here in Los Angeles because, you know, this is where decisions are made when it comes to entertainment. And so we started this company with the specific idea of forcing Hollywood to tell Latinx stories and force them to tell them in high quality, force them to tell them with, you know, all these amazing things that every other show gets. And so I think for me, you know, it was a big deal when one of the, as Ricardo mentioned, another executive producer on the series, Rico Martinez, and he works for me at Campanario. And we're a big part of when he came on board was him sort of saying, hey, I have a connection to Simran Singh, who knows the family, and they're interested in potentially doing a show. And I think for me, that was, when I heard that, I was like, all right, we're getting on a phone, we're figuring this out. And so making the show happen was basically that, was talking to the family, explaining to them, you know, who we are as a company, what we loved about their story. And I think for me, what was really important to, you know, sort of why we were telling the story today was, you know, I never forgot that, you know, Selena was a trailblazer. You know, we're talking about a Latina who started a fashion line, who started a business, you know, who do all these amazing things that now pop stars do on the reg, right? Like everyone comes out with a perfume line now. Everyone that comes with a fashion line. That wasn't done, right? And that was something that Selena did. You know, and we're talking about Selena, we're talking about someone who Beyonce credits as inspiration. You know, Cardi B, anyone, The Weeknd just mentioned her the other day, right? Like we're talking about a global American, Mexican-American icon. And so for me, it was really important to sort of work with the family to make sure we were telling that authentic, true story. And then really just sort of make sure that we were getting the scripts right. So we hired, Moises Zamora, who hired then a great team of writers to really, get the scripts into shape, hiring a great cast like Ricardo. But I think for me, it was sort of, why I started was, again, like I've always loved this story. I've always known that the Selena and the Quintanilla story is one that should be told again and again in an environment where there's zero shows about Mexican-American families on air, zero. It is important for me to be like, how do we, celebrate our culture and all that. And I think the Selena story is perfect for that. It showcases both nostalgia, right? So it's fun. We get to hang out in the 80s and 90s again, and that's always fun. And get to see our people dressed in cool 80s gear. We also had crazy hair back then. And so that's really exciting. And then on top of it, all the themes that we get to talk about, right? In terms of gender, in terms of identity. I feel like all of those are super resonant even now. And they were obviously a different context in the 80s and 90s, but talking about that story now, it does feel even more present and more inspiring.
Thank you.
I got a call. Hey, you've got this audition, and it's for Selena the series. And I was like, okay. I was like, who are they? Who are they trying to? Which character? I'm too old for this one. I'm too old for this one. I don't think I'm quite old enough to play Abraham yet, though. And that's what it was for. And so I was like, I don't see it. And so I told my reps, I said, guys, I think that I don't want to waste anybody's time. And then they're like, the casting director wants to talk to you. So Carla Hull calls me up, our casting director for Selena. And she's like, Ricardo, I think this is your part. I'm like, okay, please just explain why, because I don't see it, And so she goes, I'm going to send you some photo references because you're playing him over the period of 15 years, Abraham Quintanilla. And so I saw the photos and I was like, okay, this makes more sense. And then I said, can I see some sample writing? She sent me some sample writing. And right then I was sold because I was like, I know that we've got Mexican-American writers. I know we've got people that are from South Texas that understand South Texas. So I can see that in the writing. Great. And then it became a process of, I had to send in a self-tape, and then I had an audition Zoom with Jaime and Rico Martinez. And we got to know each other a little bit, and I did some of the scenes, and then I had to send in another tape, I think, after that, which, I think they just wanted to see me try and do my best look as Abraham, so, and then, I got some glasses, slicked my hair, however. And, but for me, the work was in understanding, I was doing the work as I was doing these auditions. It was trying to understand who Abraham is, to me, because I had never seen the movie. And I've yet to see the movie. I'll see it now. But once I was in this audition process, I didn't want to see it because I didn't want that to inform me on any choices that I was making as an actor. And so I started watching some of his interviews, and that's when I was like, this guy looks exactly like and sounds like any one of my tíos or my father. It just, I know this world. I know this man. Even though I don't know this man, I know him. And but then again, that's something where it's like, oh, so then if I know it, then it's very easy. And that's a trap that any actor can fall into, and they'll die on that sword. And I was not going to allow myself to do that. So I just kept watching his interviews over and over and over again, calling up my tíos and talking to them, listening to the cadence of their voice, which I feel is something that's very specific to South Texas, and talking to my father about things, doing my research on as much of the musical aspects, like who Selena was playing with and what were the other bands and what were they like, just to get that feel. And then I found out that I got the job, and I was excited, and I was also very nervous, because it's a huge undertaking, this kind of character, and also this world, because it defines me, and it's something that I take a great amount of pride in, being Mexican-American and being from South Texas. And I wanted to make sure that I was to do the right job.
Well, having been able to watch the 9-episode season that's going to launch on December 4th, you did. And all that intentionality that you both mentioned, I think really came through in these authentic representations of what it's like to be Mexican American. I mean, that's one of the things that struck me from the pilot, right? And not only do we have, zero, as you pointed out, right, representations about Mexican American families, we also, if we do get any kind of Latino representation in mainstream, right, it's kind of this generic Latino persona or, image. And so the specificity, right, about being Mexican American, including the way they sound. I mean, that was one of the things that was so beautiful to my ears, was the way all the cast sounded, right? It is like being in your grandma's house, in your tío's house, right? This is how people, the rhythm of their voice, the way they sound, where sometimes there's a little bit of Spanish introduced or a little bit of broken Spanish, but, the sound was just really, really comforting. One of the things that just really struck me. And I did notice, right, that I went back and I looked at who was being credited as a writing team, and tried to learn a little bit about each of those individuals. And it does seem like it was primarily Mexican American, right, who was in the room crafting the scripts. And I do think that really mattered. It translated onto the screen in the words that were spoken, the storyline itself, the things, even in most beautifully, which I think it might be a little bit surprising to people, is that it really, for me, felt like an ensemble, right? Like story, right? It's about the family. It's about the family dynamic. So Selena's name is in the name of the show, right? But it's more than her, right? It's about everybody's effort to make her, to provide her that success that we all come to have, know and admire. But it wasn't an individual effort. And I think that's like that part of the narrative is such an important piece of that experience as well, because, so many of of the students that I work with, and even when they talk about their achievement to, being first generation college, it's a family effort. It's a collective effort. It's very rarely, right, like I did this all by myself. And so it was just beautiful to see how that played out in the show as well, what a collective effort that was. And the fact that it showed, it wasn't just hinged on kind of like the milestones of her career, but really the day-to-day hard work and sacrifices of what it took to become the star that she did, right? You see that played out in the hardships and what it's like to be working class and to have like big dreams, even with that kind of limited resources and what you do. And I think that, even though there's that specificity about Mexican American, I think there's a universality in that specificity of how the family works together, of what it's like to have those kinds of dreams beyond your current, means. It was just beautifully told on screen. So I appreciate that all those things were part of the intentionality of everybody that came together to make the project, because I really do think it translated beautifully on screen. I think it's going to resonate with people.
Thank you for saying that. That was a major part, exactly what Ricardo said. Like that was a major part of what we tried. And I think, look, you guys are all Selena experts, right? And so you guys all know that music and that Suzette was on the drums, but a lot of people who are big Selena fans didn't know that. I think when people who watch the movie and love the movie, I don't think that AB wrote the music when you watch the movie. I don't think that Suzette was such a major part of Selena's life. So I think that to me was also really important to sort of highlight, we talk about why now. It's like, because I don't think people really do know the Selena story, right? Because it isn't just like a girl and her dad together. It was a whole family working and sacrificing. And when we talk about, dreams coming true and exactly that's been my experience as a Mexican American, right? Like I'm talking to you guys right now because of my family and the sacrifices that my dad made and my mom made and all these amazing things. And, tonight I'm going to go eat dinner with my parents, right? Like they are a major, major part of my life and who I am. And the only reason why I get to do what I did today was because of my parents, right? So I really related to that. And I just think that like, by being super specific about the Mexican American experience, and we are very specific. This is a Mexican American experience, but exactly what you said, Doctor, because I think that's exactly true. Like when you get so specific, it becomes universal, right? So what's really exciting about premiering on Netflix is that we're a Mexican-American family in Japan on December 4th. We're gonna have a Mexican-American family in Denmark on December 4th. We're gonna have a Mexican-American family in Africa on December 4th. And everyone's gonna watch the show and they're gonna say, wow, I didn't know this about Mexican-Americans. But wow, they're just like me. They also are struggling. They also, don't have a lot of means to get stuff done, or have to be intuitive, have to work hard. That's just something that's so inspiring about everyone in the world's family. So I think when we try to go specific through the lens of a Mexican-American family and through the lens of the Quintanillas, that's our goal, that anyone around the world will see this and relate to Mexican-Americans and relate to our stories, right? I think that's the biggest thing. It's like, I'm tired of people not watching or watching Mexican-Americans and only seeing one representation of us. Like we're as nuanced and human and funny and as amazing as any other culture you see on screen. And I hopefully the series is a small part in furthering that message. Sorry, Ricardo, I interrupted you.
No, not at all. No, I just wanted to tag onto it. And in that specificity of, where it's specifically a Mexican-American family, and we're telling this story of their struggles and the successes, this then becomes a story of the American dream. I mean, because that's what it is. It's that American dream success story, seen through the eyes of a specifically Mexican-American family, but American.
Exactly. When we're talking about American icons, we're talking about Elvis Presley, we're talking about Bruce Springsteen, Selena and the Quintanillas are there, right? Like, yeah. About like, these are American icons. Again, like Beyonce talks about Selena all the time, right? Like, so when we see Beyonce on screen, you can be like, that's thanks to our culture, right? So again, that's a major part about this. Like, we should be celebrating our impact on American society because we make a huge impact. And again, this show is just a small example of showing some of that impact.
Yeah. I also wanted to follow up on, just because all those things are true about what her story offers the world, why she continues to be beloved, 25 years after her death. But what were the kind of the concerns and challenges because she is so beloved and because people do have like an investment, like in terms of the casting decisions and, especially that people, have fans have really strong opinions these days and are able to express them in different, in much more kind of visible ways, right? And so what were some of the things that you wrestled with to make sure that, you were like being able to satisfy as many of those as possible?
Oh yeah, that was, it's very hard, right? Yeah, a lot of people have, and I get it, right? Because Selena is bigger than the show. It's bigger than any one of us, right? It is something so major. So yeah, I am not one to sort of say like, oh, I'm going into this and it's going to be so easy and it's going to be great. Like, oh no, this was going to be a really hard job for my company, a really hard job for me, a really hard job for my entire team, and a really hard job for everyone that we hired along the way. And I think that was really important for everyone to know along the way that, we were a Latinx company, we're a Mexican-American company. It was going to be really important for us to hire Latinos across every single bit. There wasn't going to be, and I don't have the exact percentage, but I was like, every department head was Latino I'm trying to think about the white people that we did hire, right? There were some guest parts and stuff like that, but like it was Latinos, Mexican Americans, other Latinos as well, right? Because I think, her experience was not, also resonate with a lot of other Latino communities, Latinx communities. So yeah, that was super important. So everyone we hired, it was really important that they understood the culture. They were from the culture, they understood it, that they related to it, that they understood the mission of this show, that they understood that this was a big deal, that this wasn't going to be like oh yeah, let's all come on board and like do a show. It's like, this show is going to have impact. It's important. And everything we do is going to take a decision behind it. So it's not just going to be like, oh, hiring someone. It's like, no, we have to hire someone who understands South Texas. We have to hire someone who understands, the food they ate, all these different types of things. That was a major part of it. So, all I can say is like, I know that people are going to have a lot of opinions and I welcome them. Right. And again, because I know this isn't my story, it's everyone's story. All I can say is that we worked so hard to make sure that everyone who was working on the show understood the impact of the show and really had a special place in their heart for it, right? And I think that's what's really special. I mean, like, you know, I think for our crew, for instance, our Latino crew, a lot of them often work on narco shows or work on, you know, other type of shows. This was the first show they were working on, celebrating our culture in an inspiring way. So I think also for them, they were inspired every day when they went to set. So, you know, I think all I can say is like, I get it, right? Like, I am so nervous about the show. And, but all I can say is that like, we've worked so hard, and in casting and creative and everything was such, we really worked hard to make it happen. And I recognize that, you know, people are going to have their comments and critiques, but, you know, we tried really hard. And a big part of that, by the way, was the casting. And Ricardo, you know, being from San Antonio, being that he understood the area was a big part of it. You know, Christian being Mexican-American herself, that was a big part of it. Noemi being Mexican-American herself was a big part of it. I mean, I think these are, you know, it was a major, we never lost sight of the impact that the show could have. And I think that's why we worked so hard on it.
What were some of the things that you, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Ricardo.
No.
I was just going to ask if there was anything that you learned about Selena being a part of this production that you didn't know going into it, something that, you know, that you portrayed on screen, that you came to understand like a backstory to?
You know, I've said it before. Honestly, the meager beginnings and the struggle, the truth of the struggle in those early years is something that I really didn't have a lot of information about. But when I read those scenes, and you've seen the first 9, you saw the pilot, so I'll go to a specific scene that I talk about. It's, you know, when they move in with his brother, and they're all crammed into that one room, you know. And when I was doing that scene, when I read it, I already knew, but then when I was doing it, it immediately reminded me of when my father would pack me and my 2 sisters and my mother in the car, and we'd drive down to Eagle Pass for Thanksgiving or for Christmas. We'd walk into my abuelita's house on Bryant Street, and there would be 12 of us, me and my primos, all in sleeping bags, you know, on the living room floor that was linoleum. You know, I remember the bathroom, you know, it didn't even have drywall. You could see the studs, you know, and the floor, like half the floor was missing, and you could see the plumbing going down into the dirt in the bathroom. You know, I mean, all my father and all my family members of his generation and prior were all migrant farm workers. And my father was the first to be given the opportunity to, you know, either pick in the fields or go to school, and he made the most of his opportunity. You know, so those are my roots. And when I saw that, when I read it in the script, and then when I saw it as we brought it to life on set, it was impactful. You know, it really, I was like, damn, man, this is my story too.
Yeah, I think that I totally agree with Ricardo. I think even being such a huge fan, you know, when you really dig in, you don't really get a sense of how much sacrifice it actually took, right? Like going to school and playing every weekend, and, you know, going to all these faraway places to play. I mean, I think we're also used to Selena the icon, Selena the legend, that I really don't think a lot of us remember what it takes to make a legend. You know, what does it take, the actual work it took? And I think that's really something exciting. And I think secondly, the other thing that honestly, I knew when I was younger because it's her spirit, but I just think, you know, doing the show and reading, you know, working with the writers and all that, it was her goofiness. She was so charming and so funny, you know, and I think this is what, you know, Suzette will often say about her, what she remembers most about her sister is how goofy she was. And I think hopefully, you know, our shows share some of that as well. Her lightness, and the whole family's lightness, by the way. The whole family's really funny. But hopefully, you know, we share some of that too. Because again, I think we're so used to Selena when we think about her now, that I think just her as a human and the family as humans, I think was something that was really special to remember along the way.
No, that's true. One of the beautiful things that comes across is the relationship between brother and sister, sister and sister, siblings and parents, and just how they, you know, did like rib each other and joke, but also were just incredibly supportive all the time, and had faith in each other. So that really, came across very nicely in telling the story. You shared, Ricardo, like having like a specific kind of connection to that scene. I wonder if there's another piece of dialogue, another scene that you found that was just really, really memorable or your favorite from the series. And Jaime, if you have one too, if you have like a favorite moment that you got to recreate or create for the series.
All of them. I mean, like any Selena moment that you guys remember of discussing in your class, I really think we probably did it. Like we worked really hard to tell the whole Selena and the Quintanilla family story, right? And I think that was one of the fun things about when the trailer launched a few weeks ago, was all these fans reacting like, oh my God, they're showing this, or they're showing this performance, or they're showing Johnny Canales. Like, I grew up with Johnny Canales. Like, I grew up with Johnny Canales. So I think, like, it's a lot, right? Like, I think in terms of favorite moments or favorite dialogue, I don't want to spoil anything, but I just think that there's a lot of moments of dialogue, both from Selena or Abraham, played by Ricardo, that speak to what it means to be a Mexican American, and that where you're sort of in between, but maybe there's also a power behind that, and there's a superpower behind that. So I don't want to spoil anything, but I think our series also does a really good job of potentially furthering how we discuss Mexican American identity as well. So I think those are some of my favorite moments in the series. And again, so don't want to spoil it, but those were something I'm very excited for fans to see.
For me, it would be the family scenes, and specifically, the scenes between Marcela and Abraham, because I don't know that we have a lot of that information. I mean, I can ask Jaime, how accurate is that? How fictional is that? Because I think the Quintanillas have a tendency to be very private people, from what I've gathered. And so for me, it's like you get this really kind of close-up look detail as to what this relationship was between these two parents that are struggling to make their children's dreams come true, and to make their family dreams come true, and the tenderness that exists there, and the anxieties that exist there, and the suffering, and the joy, and the fun. And the just everything. There's so many beautiful moments there, and we had Sadie Lopez is an amazing actor to work with. I loved all my scenes with her. I loved all my scenes with everybody, with Noemi, with Christian, with Gabe. There's a beautiful scene between Gabe and I as our characters that it breaks my heart. So the family stuff is, to me, what's most important, because this wouldn't have happened without family.
And I do agree, there was outstanding performances by everybody in their role. I mean, they just truly, truly took me on the ride with them. I fell in love with all of them, rooted for them, felt their joy, felt their pain. They came across beautifully. And I agree, Ricardo, that what this show kind of offers is, if anything, particularly for Abraham, for that character, that everyone around him kind of softens him. So he has kind of like this hardened persona, right, that I think is public, like the way the public understands him. And so the way that we're able to see him engage with his wife, with his kids, they kind of, soften him a little bit. And it feels like a natural family dynamic. And I think one that also people can resonate with, who have, fathers that might have, this real kind of strong, like macho kind of characteristic, right, about them, but they still have like a softness and connection. So I think that came across really nicely. And Jaime, I wanted to go back to what you were saying about those moments of dialogue where we're kind of like offering understanding or explanation of what it means to be Mexican American. I mean, those I latched onto immediately. And I love that it didn't feel like a contrived part of the series. It didn't feel like it was a message, right? Like it was about the message. It felt like that was how families dealt with those moments, right? So there was because those come up when you are like bicultural and bilingual, and have mixed fluency in, you know, in those languages, right? Those are the things that kind of come up in these families. And so I just really appreciated how they unfolded in the story very naturally for those moments, right, where you would have to like center it and talk about it. And again, I just, as a media scholar, right, who pays really close attention to those representations, to just see it to be so centered on Mexican-American experience was just so gratifying, so gratifying.
Thank you for saying that. No, that was really important to us. It was really important to, you know, I think so much of us we're in this moment where we're talking about identity, and it's such a big part of our lives right now in 2020. And I just think that, you know, we often don't get to see the exploration of the Mexican-American identity on screen and how nuanced and powerful and unique it is, right? I think being Mexican-American, I often say it's a superpower. I really do think that. I think it gives me a perspective that very few other Americans have. And it's not to discount any other perspective. It's more just to sort of say, like, I'm really proud of my perspective. I think I'm really proud of where I was born. I'm really proud of my culture. And I do think it gives you a really interesting perspective on a sort of an outsider perspective on American culture, but while still being inside. And I think that's a really powerful way of influencing culture and changing it. And so, you know, our show, look, at the end of the day, our show is really just meant to entertain, right? It's meant to make you laugh. It's meant to make you fun. It's meant to give you those emotions of a Selena concert, right? Like when you go to a Selena concert, you want to, you know, you want to dance, you want to have fun. That's really what our show's about, right? We want to give you those emotions. But yeah, I think if we do our job right, when we're giving you those emotions, when we're giving you that show, hopefully, you know, at the back of your mind, you are learning something about Mexican-American identity, that, you know, there is a message there, that we're not sort of trying to like ram down people's throats. But hopefully people do get it, because that was a really big part of what we're trying to get out of it. So I'm glad you saw that, Doctor, because it was a lot of hard work.
Yeah. Could you just talk a little bit about it, or maybe be a little bit more specific, because my students also were wondering like how involved the Quintanilla family was in the production. So you kind of referenced, you know, like having at least conversations with them, but, and Ricardo even mentioned, I don't know how much like this is based on what they told you, right? Like these particular experiences, but yeah, what was that process like? How much of their memories, their recollections, it feels like maybe you got to have access to even some of their home videos, but what exactly took place to help tell this story?
Yeah, no, I mean, the Quintanillas were very, very involved, right? So Suzette's an EP on the project, and a major part of that was doing interviews with them for a long time, multiple, right? You know, Suzette came out and met the writers, you know, for a little bit, for about a couple days, you know, when they were writing the scripts. So that was a big part of it. A big part of it was, you know, there's the Selena story that everyone thinks they know, right? And there's a lot of like, rumors out there and all the factoids. And I think for us, we really want to get, well, what's the true story? So I think talking to Suzette was a big part of that. And so, you know, Suzette was really involved a lot. You know, she also has her day job, right? She has her running the, you know, working on the museum and her concert series. So, you know, she also is busy. But, you know, anytime we had a chance with Suzette, we took it, and we asked her so many questions about growing up, the not just the facts, but the emotions behind it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, that was a big part of the series that we're excited about, you know, was working with the Quintanillas. And again, I think that was a big part of, for me, because I think the Quintanillas have, you know, a lot of people have thoughts about the Quintanillas in South Texas and around the country. And I think, you know, specifically when it comes to Abraham, you know, when we talk about Mr. Quintanilla, you know, I do feel like people talk about him in a way that we don't talk about other celebrities, fathers who manage their careers. You know, when it comes to, you know, other current pop stars, you know, Taylor Swift, for instance, her dad also helps manage it and bought tour buses and all these things. And we don't hear a lot of criticism about Taylor Swift's dad. And so I do think a lot of how we talk about the Quintanillas is sort of mired in this sort of old sort of thought process of like, Mexican Americans aren't treated the same. So I do hope that this series sort of highlights that the Quintanillas are human, are, you know, funny, dramatic, and yeah, they're good business people, they're tough, but who isn't? And I think when you grow up Mexican American, that's a big part of who we are. You got to be tough.
Mhm.
So no, I think they were a really exciting part of the series. And I don't know if there's any specific questions about like stuff, but no, like it's easier when scenes come out and we can talk about like the scenes that have been out and sort of like, oh, that scene came from Suzette or that came from,
Mhm.
you know,
Mhm.
but a lot of the scenes came from personal stories from the family.
Mhm. It certainly felt that way. And it just, yeah, it just added so many other additional layers and gave a multi-dimensional picture to both Selena and her family that I think fans and people who are learning about her for the first time and seeing the series, right, will be able to appreciate. And that's my next question. Like, what are your goals and dreams and hopes, for the series? Like, what are the audiences you had in mind? What do you want them to walk away with after watching it?
One thing that Jaime's been mentioning, it's hard to wrap your head around, but come December 4, you're going to have a family in Japan learning about Selena Quintanilla and the Quintanilla family. You're going to have a family in Denmark learning about Selena Quintanilla and the Quintanilla family. I mean, it's dropping worldwide. So that in itself is people are going to get to learn about this American family that also happens to be a Mexican American family. So this Mexican American experience is going to go global December 4, from South Texas. That's going to be pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what's most exciting about it. So like, yeah, like whatever happens with the show, it's really out of my hands. We've worked so hard, but no matter what, how awesome is it that our culture is going to be all over the world on December 4th? Like, I just think that's just so exciting, so amazing. So yeah, I hope people watch it because I hope people see what I see every day, right? That we're amazing, that we're awesome, that we have so much to give, that we are hard workers, we're so smart, we're so funny. And I think to me, like, that's what I want the world to see. So yeah, I hope this becomes a big hit because, I want people to think about our community in a different way. But no matter what, I'm still so proud of everything we accomplished. Still so proud of a Mexican-American company getting this on air, working with Netflix, an incredible cast of Latinos, an incredible crew of Latinos, incredible writing staff of Latinos, all working together to create something that looks incredible, that is fun. I just think that in itself, I'm super proud of that accomplishment, and super proud that our stories will be there in the globe. And so I hope that this works so that we have more opportunities to tell more, right? But nevertheless, I will never lose sight of how excited that we are that we as Latinos got to accomplish this, right? That we get to have a big Netflix global show. And that's really exciting.
Yeah, it's one of my underlying goals as well for the show is that, one, obviously that it's incredibly successful, but then it opens the door to tell all the other stories about our community that haven't been told yet, right? So that it's not a one-shot deal for us, right? That this is just revealing, right? Like the richness in our communities and our stories, and so that we can tell more of them in more places. So I really do hope that that's one of the outcomes.
And our work, like I feel like oftentimes in Hollywood you'll hear like, oh well, like will this work? It's like, Coco was the #1 movie in China for 6 weeks, and it's just like everyone in Hollywood was like, what? That's so weird. I'm like, no, it wasn't. I mean, it's like, it's a great story, and also it's about family, and in Asia they also have families. I mean, it's like like Hollywood just tends to overthink things, right? And it's, I'll say that, yeah, I hope our show's a big hit. So we get to make more. But I'll also say this, even if our show's not a big hit, we should still get to make more of our shows.
Yeah.
It's like so many other groups get to make a show and it doesn't work and they get to make another show. So it's like, that's what I want for our community, right? I want the ability just to be able to make shows and make more of them. And some will work, some won't, but that's Hollywood for you. That's entertainment. I mean, it's, that much we can't control, but I think, hopefully, this just is a small part in it furthering, just like, if anything, we've hired so many Latinos that, they'll be able to do more shows. Hopefully Ricardo will do so many, he already is a huge star, but like, hopefully this opens up even more doors for him. Right. So I think, we're hopeful, but if it doesn't happen, don't hold us against us, Hollywood.
Well, I do know that, I mean, it was one of the like reasons that this class was so important for me, right, is that it allowed our students and then the larger community to see the value in like studying ourselves, right? That there's like value, there's knowledge in our community that we should be part of the larger, curriculum, that our students engage. And Selena was just the perfect kind of anchor point to make that point. And I look forward to, it's been a very positive experience so far, and all indicators are that I'm going to be able to continue to teach this class. And so I look forward to being able to draw from the series, right, once it's available to everybody, to incorporate it into the class, because I think there's wonderful, like, teachable moments that will allow students to connect, to reflect, right, to have some critical assessment of their own experiences. So I really, really am looking forward to that.
Well, I tell you what, once the show drops and it's there, and if you do get to continue the class, I live in San Antonio, so have me come by once we can gather back together in classroom and stuff. I'd be more than happy to. I
appreciate that, and I will follow up with that. Thank you. Good.
Fly down. By the way, I think what you just said is so surreal, because I'm an academic nerd at heart. The only I had, in college, I went to grad school because I already had the glasses and the beard. So I felt like I was just like a shoulder patch away from becoming so I was like, oh, but no, I mean, it's surreal for you to say that. It's exciting for you to say that, because I think for me, as a person who studied media growing up and doing, papers about shows or papers about movies, it's surreal to hear you say that you feel like our show could be part of that. As well. That's really exciting. And so obviously, once people get to watch it, I'd love to, talk to people even more about it.
Yeah. I'm wondering if we might spend our last few minutes, maybe if you guys want to share what upcoming projects you might have in the works. I know probably the pandemic might have slowed down things moving forward for each of you, but if there's anything that, everybody that's participating can be on the lookout for to help support, what are some of the things in the works that you might be involved in?
I know I've got a lot of press that I have to do for Selena coming up. And aside from that, the biggest project that I have coming up is getting my ass back home to San Antonio to be a father. So, yeah.
Which is a great project. It's a great project.
Yeah, it is.
No, honestly, look, the pandemic has slowed things down for my company, but we're very excited about Selena. We're very excited about Selena Series Part 2, which will launch at some point. And we're also working on the second season of our Amazon show, which is set in Mexico City, about, singles in Mexico City dating and living. It's a Spanish language series. So if anyone's interested in that, you can check that out. But just in general, no, I think Selena's been my company's life for a few years, and we're excited to sort of launch this baby, and then from there, hopefully be able to create more.
Yeah. I just realized that one of the things that I wanted to share that I haven't yet, that was, I think, a really cool aspect of the show, and one that my husband, who watched alongside with me, pointed out, was not only, right, is there's this beautiful specific Mexican-American story, but it's also like this, like what it was like to live in the 80s and 90s. And I think you mentioned that earlier, Jaime, right, this beautiful kind of recreation. And he said it's almost like a Stranger Things vibe, right, where people are like into that kind of retro and going back and celebrating that. And that's one of the really cool elements about this show also, right, that you the costume choices, the soundtrack, because really one of the things that struck me in watching the 9 episodes, it's not necessarily like a Tejano soundtrack. It's just like an 80s and an early 90s soundtrack. And so you're hearing like pop music, English language music. And I do think that that's going to be really appealing to viewers, something they can look forward to, right? To seeing that. And what was the work like? How hard was that to make all of those things kind of happen and come together?
I want to give credit to Rico Martinez, who really took charge of the music. But I think the big important part of it was Selena and the Quintanillas grew up listening to Mexican music and American music, right? So one of the reasons why their sound was so great was it's an infusion of so many different sounds, right? So I think, yeah, making a show about the quintanillas, it would be hard pressed not to include some great 80s and 90s jams that inspired them, you know, that they sang on the bus, you know, that sort of influenced them who they were as artists. And yeah, I think that was a big part of it, right? Like, you know, Straight Outta Compton was another great nostalgia film, right? I wouldn't even argue the OJ show that Ryan Murphy did was a great nostalgia sort of show. A lot of these shows that talk about the 80s or 90s are fun because honestly, we don't get to see a lot of Latinos, Latinx, Latinas in 80s or 90s gear. We just don't, in this whole genre of nostalgia, we don't exist.
Right.
But, you know, like we were also there. We also bad hair choices. We also did not look good.
We wore shoulder pads.
Yeah, like
yeah, you did.
Us makes everything look so good. Like we, you know, here we are trying to be like 80s gear, and like Christian and Noemi would come out and something be like, that looks great. Like I should wear that today. Like, you know, I feel like all credit to our costume designer too, Adela, who worked so hard on the looks. You know, every single picture, you know, was a reference. You know, all the major looks that you guys are looking forward to, you know, her Grammy dress, you know, or any of that stuff, all handmade, also all hand sewn. I mean, like there was a lot of care and attention taken to, you know, if we're going to do an 80s and 90s show, it better look like an 80s and 90s show. And maybe your students are probably too young to have lived in the 80s. But it was an awesome time. And, you know, apologies in advance for some of our style choices. But I think that the cast makes them look good even now. So hopefully we start a resurgence of some cool shoulder pads. Ricardo, what was it like dressing up and, you know, all that stuff?
Well, for me, it was awful because I was wearing dad gear from the 80s and 90s. So, you know, I'm sitting over there looking at what Christian and Noemi and Gabe are wearing, going like, that's the stuff that I wore, man. I graduated high school in '89. Like, you don't rock those. I rock those, you know? So, but yeah, it was great to see like the color schemes. We'd walk on a set every day, and I would just be tickled laughing because I'm sitting here thinking, I know somebody who had furniture choices like this back in 1992, and it was awful, but we thought it was amazing.
Yeah.
My aunt still has those same couches from the 80s. So I think for me, it's just sort of like, yeah, like going on set was like, oh, I'm at my tia's house. Yeah.
Yeah.
So have you already filmed all of the 18 episodes of the series, or are you still working on the second half?
We just wrapped on Saturday. So we finished shooting during a global pandemic. And so all credit to Ricardo and the cast and the crew. I mean, it was, yeah. So it's been a lot of work, but we just wrapped. So excited to edit them and excited to, you know, get them out to the world.
Yeah.
And you were filming mostly in Mexico?
At Baja Studios, where Titanic shot or X-Men shot. So it's this amazing facility that's great. And I often tell, you know, especially in Hollywood, everyone's always like, oh, well, why don't we shoot in Canada or why don't we shoot there? It's like, well, you know, Mexico has incredible studio facilities and then incredible crew. So why don't we shoot more using our amazing, and then Ricardo could speak to that a little bit. You know, he's sort of had that experience working in the US. Like, I think Mexican crews work differently. And I really do recommend it as something like we should be using more of our, you know, we shouldn't be just looking up north for production. We should be looking down south. Ricardo.
I've been doing this for 20 years, you know, and that is hands down the best crew I've ever worked with. I mean, and it starts from the fact that son todos mexicanos, you know, and it's like, I want to be here working, and I will make sure I do the absolute best job, and I take pride in my job. Every single person was like that, you know, and every single person took pride whenever we got on set and we were ready to work, you know, and it was just, I know I made some lifelong friends with that crew. I can't wait to hopefully work with some of them again, all of them. And it was crazy. I mean, because it's like we had all this great stuff going on, and then it gets framed with, you know, 2020 and the pandemic and the election and all these other things, you know. But it's like I was talking to Christian about it the other day. I said, you know, we're not even going to have to work to remember this one. We're going to remember this one for the rest of our lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No. Yeah.
Well, thank you again, both. I know that you have other press that you probably need to get to, but what you've done is a beautiful testament to Selena's legacy. I'm so excited that you're going to be able to share this with everybody. Good luck, best wishes, all positive energies your way. Thank you again. And Ricardo, I will reach out once this course is on the books again.
And to all your students that I know are listening and tuning in, December 4, please support. Representation matters. And if you see me walking around in San Antonio, just socially distance, come up to me and say that you were part of this class, and I will definitely talk to you. Okay?
Awesome. Thank you both again. Goodbye, everybody.